Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a really wonderful webinar. It's by Alissa DeVito. She's going to be talking about critical reading in the era of fake news. We do have a couple things on our agenda item, but of course we will begin, as we do all good things, in prayer. So in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, giver of all good gifts, enter into our mind and hearts. Give us the gift of knowledge and the grace to use it wisely. Help our memory that we may remember what we learn and recall it when necessary. Give us perseverance and fortitude. Help us in our endeavors. Guide us in the classroom. You who are the way, the truth, and the life, let us not be deceived by false teaching. St. John Newman, pray for us. So just a couple housekeeping items as we begin tonight. This webinar will be archived. The archive will be available on YouTube and will be sent out via the email that you will receive tomorrow. In that email also you will find a copy of this presentation for your notes. Looking at our attendance today, we do have one individual who will be receiving Act 48, so congratulations. That will be submitted separately as well, along with a feedback form. With that being said, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, which is Miss Alissa DeVito. She is a technology integration coach, pre-K-12, covering Philadelphia North and Montgomery County. She is a Level 2 Google Certified Educator, an Apple Teacher Certified, and a Common Sense Media Technology Mentor, also certified. She previously taught 7th and 8th grade ELA and Social Studies at St. Joseph St. Robert School in Warrington. And she is a wonderful person to follow on Twitter. Please follow her at Alissa_DeVito. During tonight's webinar, we will be using a back-channel chat feature, Today's Meet. Today's Meet is a wonderful tool for your classroom. It is a free tool that allows you to have discussions, and the back-channel part of it is typically there is something else going on. So, for example, today we'll have our presentation, and there will be questions that Alissa will ask, and we will be discussing them in the back-channel chat. This tool is also great to use during movies or presentations in your classroom so students remain engaged. So we certainly encourage you to check it out. And with that being said, I'm going to turn the controls over to Alissa, and she can get us started.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Aaron, for that wonderful introduction. I am really excited to chat with you all about this tonight. Can you see my screen, AOP Tech folks?
Yes,
Am
we
I
can.
showing? Okay,
Yes,
good.
you are.
You're good. I always get a little nervous that my screen isn't going to show when I go to start. So I'm so excited to talk to you about this tonight. I am a news junkie myself, and I really think it's important, especially with our high school students and upper elementary. I see there's some elementary folks on with us today, in upper elementary in particular, to really discuss and examine the news and current events. But sometimes in our world events and national events, and sometimes political climate contributing to that as well, it's really tricky to do with students. So today we're going to look at critical reading. How do we get students to think critically about the media, whether that be what they're viewing on their smartphone, whether that be what they are reading in the newspaper or via social media, whatever the case may be. How do we get them to be better critical thinkers so that way they can identify fake news or misinformation? So tonight we will. Here's kind of our overview of where we're headed. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do teens currently view the news. Common Sense Media recently put out a study to examine how tweens and teens, so even my elementary folks who joined us this evening, this pertains to you. How do tweens and teens view the news? And it was fascinating to me. We're going to test our own perception skills. We're going to review some tips that apply to just about any reader, to us as adults, all the way down to even we can use some of these tips with our high schoolers, we can use them with our upper elementary, and even bleeding down a little bit into the lower elementary, perhaps if you change the language to be a little more grade level appropriate. But how do we, what should we do? What should be our litmus test and our direction on that? We're going to brainstorm some ideas for lesson plans in this as well. And we're going to explore some pre-made resources. There's a lot of resources right now online pertaining to helping students learn about the media, helping them to decipher what they're reading online. And I think that's been a big trend recently. And I feel like each election cycle, we just had election day yesterday, each election cycle I see new and more resources because it really is something that's very prevalent for our teens. So first of all, I want to level set here a little bit. This is most definitely not a political discussion, and I know it could easily become one in a lot of different ways, but really at the heart of what we're talking about today is that this is a digital literacy issue. It's very different than the way we might have examined newspapers in the past. Maybe, you know, you grew up with, you know, mom or dad coming home with the newspaper every day. That's what I grew up with. Both my grandparents and my parents every day brought home the Star Ledger in New Jersey, and that was really my exposure to news, and then probably the 6:30 nightly news, and those were the two things that I had. But students today have probably not even really the newspapers at their disposal the way you and I might have, but definitely have it 24/7 on our phones. We have it 24/7 on our phones. It's made me a news junkie. And so it really lends itself to that digital literacy, or those digital literacies, plural, that Aaron spoke about last month in October to start off our series. This is really a conversation when we look at digital literacy in civics. It's an area in communication. So we really are really helping our kids just be more thoughtful consumers of digital media, whether it be news via a video or print. So why is it important? We live in a 24/7 news cycle. We can get it anywhere on TV, any time of day, and that's overwhelming. We can get it on our phones for any time of day. We are, if we choose to be, inundated with it. I recently removed an app from my phone from a news channel that I really liked for local news, but because they had so many push notifications, I took them off. And yes, I could have just turned off the push notifications, but a competitor didn't have quite as many, so I switched to just a different one. So I felt like I was getting some of the breaking news that I needed, but we can really be inundated with it. A lot of news is sensationalized. Everything is a big deal, and sometimes that's justifiably so. We've had quite a number of, and sadly, quite a number of national tragedies recently. That is news that needs to be at the forefront. But not everything is the breaking news event that sometimes it's made out to be. And that makes it really hard for students to know the difference between what is, you know, really at the core, the most important pieces, and what's great information to know, but maybe falls lower on that list. So it's imperative that we help students read with that critical eye for misinformation, and particularly at the high school level, looking for that bias. And really, that's a lifelong skill. being able to analyze text and determine if there's a bias to it or if there's something that you really need to pursue further, to check the validity of something. So it's really a lifelong skill that we're giving them, something especially at the high school level is so important going into their collegiate lives. Most teens, and we'll look at some statistics in just a few minutes, but most teens are getting their news currently from social media. And it's probably not necessarily surprising to you dealing with teenagers, though they're not always on Facebook. Facebook has their news headlines and has been in the news recently for some hot water relating to their news on their site. Twitter. And it's really crazy to see that, because really I think back to, you know, my experience in high school, and there was no social media, so that was definitely not the method that I was getting my news from. And I think even I wouldn't even say it's until, you know, more recently that that's something new. And when something's new, we really do have to, as educators, take a look and examine this. The danger in it is that sensationalized the clickbait kind of articles that are false or totally inaccurate, take a sentence out of context because they get paid per click, and that's where that moniker clickbait comes from. So I'm going to ask in that discussion window, if you're not there, and feel free, please join us in the Today's Me. Aaron just popped in this question here. How do you currently address this in your classroom at all? Is it something that maybe because of your content area is very much on your radar, or maybe because of your content area hasn't been so much on your radar? Not saying it's unimportant to your content area, but it might not just be at the forefront of your mind there. So I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to play some breaking news music here, and I'm going to give you a minute to answer that in the chat window. All right, so I saw a couple things pop into the chat window there. Annabelle, can you give us just a little roundup of what maybe started that discussion? And that discussion can continue on as we're looking through these slides as you have more. And I encourage you, if you're not in that chat, to please join us in there. But Annabelle, can you give us a little summary of the startings to that conversation?
Sure. It looks like it's kind of a mixed board. Some deal with it directly head-on, allowing the students to share what's on their minds. One site that keeps coming up is Newsela, using that as a site to look at current headlines, but in a safe manner. So that seems to be a platform that a few are using.
Great, and you'll see that, my Newsela folks, you'll see that pop up later on in our discussion this evening. It's definitely something we're going to touch on, so folks who maybe aren't utilizing it at the moment, so you can have a peek into what that is, because that is a fantastic resource for you to be using in your classroom related to that. So let's look at some statistics here. Common Sense Media conducted a survey in February of 2017 on the impact of news and fake news on children. They targeted tweens and teens. So essentially, the breakdown was the age group that most start having cell phones and smartphones at their disposal. That's kind of the line a little bit that they drew. Also because two, some of the recommendations for the youngest grade levels, our youngest folks, even though we're secondary here, is much different when it comes to news. So it really focused on teens and tweens. And I thought the results were so interesting, and some of them were staggering. So here's a snapshot. So 48% of kids, these teens and tweens, valued the news. That made me feel really good. As somebody who loves news and sees the value of it for my students, it was great to see that just about the half mark valued it. Would I like it to be higher? Sure. But that was probably higher than my expectation was. 70% of them felt like the news made them smarter. Very interesting. And that makes me think a lot, too. Growing up, I had dinner with my parents every night at the dinner table, and we watched the nightly news and we discussed it. And I think maybe, you know, some of these kids who feel like the news makes them smarter, some of that also is probably akin to, you know, who they're discussing news with, or if they're able to have anybody to discuss it with. However, and this really broke my heart, 63% felt the news made them feel angry, sad, or depressed. And I think that, you know, I think of just the news week we've had, the week leading into this presentation, and yeah, I'm sure it does. It makes me, as an adult who can, you know, process maybe a little bit better, or hopefully a little bit better, it makes me feel angry, sad, and depressed. So it would be no surprise that it does so for our kids. And really, a way for us as educators is to really acknowledge if that's what they're feeling, give them outlets for expressing that, and really giving them that opportunity to form and share that opinion. 45% of tweens and 31% of teens said this news made them feel afraid. And that was another one that really stuck out to me, that afraid had to be almost a separate category from angry, sad, and depressed. That really seeing news today made them fearful. And I think that shows us as a society we really do have a lot to be worked on many fronts. 49% of kids receive their news from social media. You know, the amount of time that Common Sense Media has researched into that teens are spending online and on social media, it's almost not a bit of a surprise to me that almost half of them are receiving it from there. Almost equivalent to that, though, I will say, almost equivalent to that was that they receive news also from parents. That was the second highest category there, or almost an equivalent. 39% said social media was their preferred news source. It's a little concerning to me. YouTube and Facebook were top. I'm not surprised about YouTube whatsoever if I think about the way that my students utilized YouTube. Unsurprising to me personally. Facebook was a little surprising to me, just knowing that teens are really migrating away from that, but still up there at the top of the list. So the survey also did strongly note that students do pick up on bias in the news. And these are some biases that maybe we're not having students hunt for. Maybe we're having them search more for things like false information. But it's important to know that. And especially because we really teach all kinds of students. We never want to choose resources that purposely alienate a group of students, that make them feel bad about ourselves. We live in such diverse communities and have diverse students that we do really need to be mindful sometimes of what our choices as educators are conveying to them. Half of them said when they saw non-white kids in the news, it related to violence or crime. And that's really sad, because there's really great examples of of all cultures, of all races, doing wonderful things. And if, you know, I can't really specifically relate from that perspective, you know, but I never would want a student in front of me to feel like the choices of articles I was picking made them feel like I was targeting them as somebody who would be violent or participate in crime because of their race or culture, things like that. So again, this kind of relates to that. 2/3 of students felt that the news did not treat men and women equally. And I think that's also a very interesting perspective. I really would have loved this to be a long-term study too, because I wonder if that perception would have been greater or less 2 years ago, 5 years ago, etc. And finally, the survey asked very specifically about fake news. The survey found that 44% of students felt that they could determine a fake story from a real one, but 31% said they had shared a story they later learned was false or inaccurate. So their perception is that they're great critical readers. But in reality, not quite skills up to snuff there. So what does this tell us as educators? One, we need to give students strong resources and skills to read the news critically. And two, we have to give them well-rounded, diverse examples of news. We can't always pick news articles from the same source. Newsela does a great job at compiling from different resources for that, from these, particularly the Associated Press. As one of those, we can really think about not just limiting ourselves. So now we're going to do a little bit of testing of our own perception skills. So I'm going to show this video to you. And Erin or Annabelle, if it's not playing clearly, please kind of let me know and I'll pop it into the chat window as well. And maybe we can pop that into the today's meet also, just so you can view it again at your disposal. But I'm going to let this go, and I'm not going to give you much to go on here, but enjoy.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you? Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
So did you catch all the changes? I hope that gave you a good chuckle, because when I first saw this video, I did not catch a single change, not one of them. I am so oblivious to it. I have to laugh at myself about it, because I really am just that oblivious. that I didn't notice a single change. And I love this video for that. And this would be a great one to use in the classroom when we're talking about, are you paying attention to the little details? I know that clip isn't directly about the news. That's actually from London's Department of Transportation about paying attention for cyclists. If you're not looking for something, if you don't necessarily see it. I think we could even apply it to walking down the street with social media now, or with our smartphones. The number of times like I've tripped because I'm not paying attention to what's surrounding me. It's a great example of that. Sometimes we can really get in the habit when it comes to news or any kind of media, whether it be video, reading it. Sometimes we do the skim and scan kind of method of reading. I'm guilty of it. You know, the passively watching a video. I have KYW on in my car all the time, and sometimes it takes the third time around on that news cycle for me to really tune in to the story to get those details. And doing so can have consequences. In this way, it was a little bit of a humorous way of having consequences there. But if we're not paying attention, or we're not teaching students to pay attention really critically to what they're reading or watching, it's hard to miss what's the bigger picture and what's going on. And I think that's a lot of times how misinformation gets circulated and things like that. So we have to train our brains, we have to train our students' brains to be really vigilant, to pay attention, to fine-tune, you know, and spot those errors and changes and fallacies there. This is such a big issue, in fact, that California is actually proposing a bill, SB 203, that would require the state of California to convene a committee of teachers to address how to deal with this in this classroom, particularly fake news, cyberbullying, and whatnot. They are looking to put something formal together to try and combat this. When I was researching it, made me crazy in a way. Like, is that totally necessary in my mind at first? Why do we need a committee to do that? But if it's not being addressed in the classroom, or there's better resources that are needed, then absolutely. So just an interesting view. It's not just us over here in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia talking about this. California is really getting there. So this resource right here is via Project Look Sharp. And these are really the essential questions for anybody reading or watching news media, or listening, I should say, to news media to start off. This is really when you're looking at a current event lesson with students, or as part of good research habit, this is your starting place in a lot of ways. It's a great way to get students used to the language that they need to be using, to talk about critical reading and talking about that in the context of news media. And you can really tailor what the topic is depending upon your content area. There's a lot out there. It applies to questions or to articles that are science-based. It could be when you're looking at a religion resource. Just because of your specific content area doesn't mean that these questions would not apply. What I might do in the classroom, really, especially at the high school level, think of this as a great roundtable activity. Think about getting some different 4 or 5 articles together, and students working in groups to really examine these baseline questions for those articles, just to say, is this a reliable source, without giving them that source. You might be getting them from a wide array of resources. Maybe you're getting them from a database. Maybe you're getting it from Newsela. Maybe you're getting it from a not-so-great site to throw into the mix. But really having them determine, is this reliable? So you're asking yourself, you're asking your students to ask themselves, who made this? Who is the producer of this content? Is that a reputable source? Is it a nameable source? Does it even list that? That list, even just listing it, is a big key. Who's the target audience for this? Are they trying to target a specific race, culture, political preference, age group? Who are they looking for? And I mean, those are questions in ELA specifically, coming from my own classroom, ELA classroom. You know, identifying an audience was one of the first things we always did when we were looking at info text. A really important one, who gets paid for this? Something that we maybe didn't necessarily think about when we were reading via the newspaper. Who is getting paid for the content in this article? I know that kids are starting to get really smart about identifying that on social media like Instagram. Is this a paid post? Well, is this a paid article for somebody to profit off of, not just the news source in general? Is somebody specific getting paid if you click on it? Who might benefit from the message of the article? Who might be harmed by the message in the article? So starting to decipher if there's a little bit of that bias there. What is left out of this message that might be important? And that's a really high-level question technique, not to just comprehend what is on that page, but to try and decipher missing pieces of information that would be critical to the better understanding of that. And ultimately, that would lead students to answering, is this a credible source, and what would make you think that? So it's to that final evaluation. So if you're really thinking about the level of Bloom's taxonomy or level of comprehension questions, this really goes all the way up that scale to synthesizing information, to analyzing information, and evaluating the information that's on the page. So it's really a high-level activity for something as simple as helping students to read a couple articles there, and that's via Project Look Sharp. The links will all be in our resources when you receive these, so no worries about getting if you don't get that right now, but definitely it's all there for you, so no worries. They have a great infographic on it if you're a teacher who loves to give out an infographic for students for these things. A couple other general tips for any reader. Check out the URL. Is there a news source? Is it ending in .co instead? Using things like Snopes and Fact Check to spot fake news. Check out information on other reputable sources for confirmation. I feel like we say this as teachers a whole lot. Have you confirmed that information with another source? That came out of my mouth in the classroom with 8th graders quite a bit. So I'm sure at the high school level, that's something that you're encouraging them to do as well. Are they just picking the first thing that comes up when they're Googling, or are they thinking critically? Is the headline written to appeal more to emotions rather than give a critical piece of information? So kind of that heightened sense of things. Take a look, have them examined for low quality signs, information that appears in all caps, significant typos, which I will say sometimes I do get frustrated. Maybe you do as well. I know we have a couple English teachers and grammar lovers on today. I can't stand the level of typos that appear in online articles, and I sometimes want to scream, get a better editor, because they're reliable sources, but it makes them seem like unreliable sources. Are the images unrelated to the content? And that was one of the big ones that came up as well. Are the images in the page something else? That clickbait is really going to be a clickbait kind of scenario there too. Read the About Us section of a source, and if a site doesn't have one, it's a red flag. So this is all via, and then the link is in there, via the News Literacy Project, which is all about helping students be better consumers of the news. So they have this really great 10 questions for news detection checklist, which is a great resource to share with your students when having the starting conversation. It's a great place to start. So I'm going to ask that. Some questions be popped in there. I think Aaron's popping that question in now. What challenges do you face in getting students to spot, fallacies in what they're reading or viewing? If you're giving students something in class, do you find that they are naturally a little bit of, and I'm going to steal a phrase from Aaron here, my favorite phrase I love to use now, a curious skeptic? Or do you feel that when you give them something, they just accept it immediately? So I'm going to throw on that breaking news. I'm going to give you some moments to check in there and have a moment to process that thought before we continue on. All right. So you can continue. I see some things are just populating into that chat window now. I've got multiple screens up right now, so I can see that some things are popping up into that window. So feel free to continue on with that conversation in that back channel chat. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some specific types of lessons that, again, you can tailor to your content area to be able to kind of dive into news a little bit more in that goal of helping them to recognize what's going on in their world. So some of these are resources. When you receive this presentation tomorrow, so about 24 hours from now, you'll receive that follow-up email that Aaron was talking about. And in that email, we'll have the archive video, the link to our YouTube channel, and it'll also have this presentation. All the links are clickable in there for you, so you can get to all these awesome resources. So, and I saw somebody, I think might have been Aaron, mentioned something about opinion there. And one of the greatest places to start that as well is really helping students to understand fact versus opinion. And I think we sometimes take for granted that they come to us in the upper grade levels and secondary knowing the difference between fact and opinion, and they probably do on a very simplistic level. I think when I asked students a lot about fact and opinion, like fact can be found in a book, opinion is what you believe. And that's true. I'm not saying that's not true at all, but it can be really a lot more nuanced than that. So what you have to really think about with them is talking about objective versus subjective information, talking about bias very specifically, asking them for examples that have indisputable facts. And that's a great way to talk about it, is using that indisputable facts, something that you can't argue against because it is truly fact. And then really colorful opinions, because I think writers are really skilled at sometimes masking opinions with great colorful language that makes it appear more factual than it actually is. If you can, bring in some newspapers. My kids were always like really enamored by newspapers, something I took for granted, but I think it's because probably, well, I know that statistically newspaper sales are declining. But I really hope that that's a medium that doesn't go away completely there. Bring in some of those newspapers for them. And what it would be a really great piece is for them to compare an online article about a topic with a print article. And is one more colorful than the other? And I often wonder that is a print article, and I don't really know if there's a right answer to that or not. There's probably not a right answer. Maybe it depends upon the newspaper that you're bringing home too, or bringing into class as well. You know, is it less colorful in the newspaper because of space, or is it more colorful online because they can add in those sponsored and paid links? Different things like that. So it really gives you a good place to start. You can even really compare how in-depth one goes versus the other, versus then if you really want to expand it another level, you know, when they're seeing it on social media, how much of that article are they really seeing? You know, I know that Twitter extended their characters, I believe, today. And is seeing a single tweet about a topic, does that really make you an expert in discussing that amongst the room? Or seeing a headline? I think sometimes students fall into the trap, and maybe we all do in little ways because of time or whatnot. We see the, you know, 180 character digested version of something, and we're like, okay, I'll take that for the moment and go. And maybe we as adults are saying, I'm taking that for the moment and then I'll follow up. And I don't know if necessarily students are making that those same decisions in there. I hope that they are. Another lesson plan wise, another great way to get students really engaged in talking about fact and opinion, and really helping them to form their own opinions, but supported opinions. I don't mean this to say in any way that opinions are bad. We all have opinions. We all need to have opinions on things, and that's a really reasonable thing. But you know, something I think we try to stress to our students is it's okay to have the opinion you have as long as A, you're respectful of others' opinions, and B, you back up your opinion. And I think debate is really a great way to foster those conversations with kids. Challenge them to debate on a topic, even challenge them to debate the validity or authenticity of some of the resources that they're finding. If you have a student who's insistent upon a site that you know is not credible, but that's the source that they want to use for their position paper, or that they want to use for a research paper, open that up. Sometimes I think that conversation with a peer pointing out that this might not be reliable because here of A, B, or C might be a little bit different than sometimes us saying it to them as teachers. I think we've all had that experience. We might say it till we're blue in the face, and then another kid in the class mentions the exact same thing that just came out of our mouths, and it sounds like the most novel idea. The joys of teenagers, I think, there. But when you use the resources that we talked about earlier from Project Look Sharp and the News Literacy Project as a guide, it really helps to start that debate, helping to start those conversations, having them ask those critical questions. And debate is not a new idea, so I'm not trying to play off debates as a new idea. Debates in the classroom for a variety of topics is a long time best practice, and it's still really relevant, and it's still really engaging. I really think that teens value when the adults in their lives, parents and educators alike, are willing to listen to their opinions and give them the voice. And I really do believe they rise to that occasion when they're given that. So debate is a great way to give them that opportunity to really talk critically about things. And using those resources from Project Look Sharp and News Literacy Project are great starting places. Another thing you can do specifically, and this really specifically lends itself to secondary folks with us tonight, teaching students really directly about fallacies and different types of fallacies and propaganda techniques. You know, the more we can help them see those specifically and name them and call them by their names, we will be able to help them pick that out in the whatever reading they're doing. And those are really strategies that will lend themselves to your students for a long time. So this is a poster, and I know it's really small to see here, and I have it opened larger in just a moment. So it's an online resource, but you can also get the poster version for this. These are the logical fallacies going from a philosophy background. I was a philosophy minor at DeSales University, so I have a deep love for all things that appeal to that side of my brain. And this website is Your Logical Fallacy Is. So I'm just going to pop out of my presentation a second to show you this in a little bit bigger of a format here. So you can use it via the website, and then you're also able to download or a free PDF of this poster, and then you can also purchase a larger printed one. And this is from schoolofthought.org, which is an offshoot of TEDx. So that's where this came from. And they actually just launched very recently a new biases one, the 24 cognitive biases, stuffing up your thinking. I can't wait to have 5 minutes to dive into this as well. So that might be another great resource in there as well. So with this logical fallacies, the nice thing is I really love that this resource, so straw man is a very common fallacy, misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. And I love that not only does it name it, it defines it, but then it really gives some kind of description, especially if you're looking at the bigger posters of these. it really is a great way to kind of look at that. So really, a logical fallacy is a flaw in our reasoning, and it's kind of the tricks and the illusions. And all right, let's hunt for the illusion. We can't hide behind the illusion. You know, black or white, where two alternative states are presented as the only possibilities when there's a lot of situations that could exist in there. You know, I would really love to hear students say, you know what, I'm reading this article, but I think there's a fallacy. I think I'm detecting a black or white fallacy here. It's only presenting these two sides. Is it just begging the question, a circular argument, which the conclusion is included in the premise itself? So it's a great resource. You can get it as a PDF. You can use it as the website yourlogicalfallacyis.com, or you can purchase, if you really wanted a nice big size one for your classroom, you can purchase a nice printed one as well, and that's from schoolofthought.org. So it's a great resource. If we're really jumping to something we want, so we've done some examination at where to start with those resources from the News Literacy Project. There it is there, my 10 questions for news detection. Project Look Sharp. Then we've kind of gotten them to really think about their fact and opinion and really break apart different things like fallacies and bias. Really, what's our most rigorous level? So if we're thinking about, you know, quadrants, we're getting to the quadrant D here of lessons. And really, one of the most rigorous things you can do for students is challenge them, especially at the high school level, to compose their own fake and new real news stories. They would have to be believable either way. And so two lesson ideas in the room that really relate to this. One, asking a student to create both a fake and real version of a story, or accurate version of a story, a short piece of information, and they have to create both, and thinking about how are they going to analyze that information to make it both, but try and not make one seem as discernible as the other. And they can maybe take some of those tips from Project Look Sharp about, you know, picking it out and then applying it to their own writing there. But really, what I would love the chance to do in a high school classroom, and if any of you wind up doing something that's a play on this, please, please, please invite me into your classroom. One, I love to be there anyway, but I would really love to see this sort of thing in action. And I'm already scheming how I can make my way in so I can do something like this. I would love to give two students in the room the same topic, and one has to create the accurate and one has to create the quote-unquote fake story. And then at the end of the day, all of those stories be presented to all of those students, and everyone in the room has to identify fake versus real. So now not only have they had to learn enough about deciphering fallacy and different things like that to be able to compose, that's a great higher level activity, but now they also have to analyze the work and evaluate the work of others. So I think that could be a really cool thing, and I would really love to see it. And I know that any of our tech coaches, we jump at the chance to be in your classroom with you. So if you decide at any point to incorporate any of this in, whether it be a debate or you decide after some activities to go full-fledged into your most rigorous activity, please invite us in. We'd love to see that. And that gives us great background to share with folks, too, when we're talking about these later on. This was a topic that I first spoke about at the Secondary Summer Tech Academy, and since then, the resources and different things that have come out since then, and different ideas that I gained from other teachers in the room, really lent itself to this. So when you invite us in, it really only helps us to enrich our experiences with all the other teachers. So Newsela, and that was mentioned a whole bunch of times in the beginning, I heard, and when Annabelle gave us a little bit of a recap there, as one of the sources that you're using, and it's a great source. I had a call with some folks from Newsela at the start of the school year, and the very first question I asked them, I said, it's a little bit of a debate. Is it Newsela or Newsela? Because teachers pronounce it both ways. And Newsela folks confirmed to me that it is Newsela. So I thought I'd share that. He said that his single most asked question. So if you were wondering yourself which way it is, now we have an official answer. I told him I wanted to make sure that when I shared folks information about it with folks, that I wanted to be doing the right thing. So it's just really, it's such a valuable resources for info text reading, Common Core aligned skills, leveled current events and resources. So I'm going to jump into Newsela in a second, but I do want to also make mention that a best practice would really, when you're thinking about what sources to choose, just choose, feel like as a teacher, choose a wide array of news sources. Pick up things from the New York Times. Utilize different things from different databases for academically minded articles, all different news networks. And I think the benefit of that is helping those students to really see bias, or how a story, how one story can be different or presented differently across a lot of platforms. And that's really an important skill. So when we're looking at high school quality, Newsela is a great place to go there too, but don't forget to bring in those authentic resources. That's really what's considered a best practice at the high school and on level in terms of news. When we're talking about lower, younger grade levels, there's some different resources that are more appropriate than actually going to standard news sources. But by the time they're in high school, utilizing a combination of various news networks, resources, things like New York Times or Wall Street Journal, those kind of exemplars, Newsela, and academic articles, that combination is where that best practice really lies in there. So I'm going to jump into Newsela just briefly here to show you some things. If that's not a platform that you are familiar with, so Newsela is great. I used Newsela years ago, and it really has expanded and grown since then. You can see that I do not have the pro trial. It has my little unlock the bro trial right here. There are both free and paid versions of this, and I know that some of our high schools do have subscriptions to it. So if yours does, really take advantage of it. It's such a great resource. If your high school does not have a subscription to it, and you see this today, you say, you know what, I really want to use this, start with that free version and then talk to your admin and say, I really think this is valuable and we really want our students to dive in. So the library of articles here, you have current news, as I jump to it. So these are all past articles, and you can see that there's a wide array. I have got geography, science and math, arts and culture, world history. So really, not only is that helping you pull things for your own content level, but it's also helping you appeal to what students' interests are. That's a great way to get buy-in from them. You can narrow those choices down by your grade level, or what reading skill you really want students to get out of them. Are you looking for them to examine what the text says? Arguments and claims would be a perfect strand of Common Core skills and point of view and purpose. Really great ones to use in this context here. News is their latest news there, all the most current articles. You can see there's quite a few from today: science, health, arts, quite a few science articles today too. I'm already spying articles that I'm excited to read here. And they also have them starting to break them down into text sets as well, and units. So especially for my U.S. history folks, there are some great units here based around the different aspects of your U.S. history courses, and they've kind of compiled articles together for you. I'm going to jump into an article. I'm just going to select this article here, this health article, about what causes food allergies. And you can see a couple things right now where you can see very directly any article you select where it came from, and that it's adapted by them. It gives you the grade level. And what the nice thing about Newsela is, one, if you're really utilizing it to its full capability, You can have your students join your class. They just announced an integration with Google Classroom. So if you're using Google Classroom, it's absolutely something that you can utilize in conjunction with Classroom. And you're able to assign students an article. So that's really when you're using this as a full-fledged platform, some of the best pieces of it. But one of the other portion of it, and what something was the first thing I gravitated to when I used this in the classroom, is my ability to change the Lexile level on an article, dropping it down to a 400 level or all the way up to its max. And the max on different articles varies. This one, the max is about a 6th grade level here. You can choose articles that are align more specifically to high school, or maybe you have some high schoolers in your class that aren't quite reading at the grade level that you'd like them to be reading at. And I think that's where I found a lot of value in it too, just from the teacher perspective, not even talking about this piece of news literacy, news media literacy. I really liked that I could have my students read essentially the same content, so we could all have a classroom discussion together, but I could assign and adjust the grade level or the Lexile level for my different readers in the room. And that made a big difference because everybody could comprehend the content at their own level, again, always pushing them forward, but could comprehend that so they could participate. And it really helped me have better and more fruitful discussions on it, because I wasn't losing half of the room because the content was over their head, or I wasn't losing half the room because they were bored because the article seemed babyish, for lack of a better word, to them. They have all kinds of vocab built into those lessons, and when you do assign them, you can have them look at the writing prompts that go to them, whether you assign it informally or formally. And there's also quiz questions, and this platform does track all of that for you. So it's a great resource for you as teachers. Again, I encourage you, if your school has a subscription to Newsela, really think about taking a deep dive in for yourself. Aaron, Annabelle, and I are all happy to help you do that if that's something that you'd like to do and you need some more support on, so you can utilize it to its fullest advantage. Again, if you don't have Newsela, take advantage of some of the free pieces of it to start, to get that impression, and then I would really encourage you to encourage your colleagues to do so, and maybe then you can approach admin about a subscription for it. So it's just a really great tool and a great starting place for getting students to examine news. You can choose the strand of standards that you're really hoping to focus and hone in on, and you can adjust that reading level so that all of your kids can really participate in those discussions but not feel overwhelmed by that text there. I hope the Newsela people see me talk about this and they send us a little something. Maybe I can hit them up for EdCamp now. Another great resource that's online is the Wayback Machine. And what a Wayback Machine does is shows you previous versions of a website, and that's great to track changes through time, advertisements included on the evolution of the web. Here it is here. So I'm going to actually pop in. So this is the Wayback Machine, and I'm going to put in CNN. Don't fail me now. Here we go. So here's CNN's past history, and I know this looks like just a bundle of things. So this site has been archived from quite a few times, to say the least, from 2000 to 2017. So I'm going to jump back to CNN in 2000, and you can see just about when it almost launched there in comparison, because January through May, when the Wayback Machine, I should say, probably launched. So I'm going to click this very first one, June 20th. Oh, it's loading. Sorry, I just fell into that bad habit of clicking too many times. I'll give it a moment. There we go. All right, we'll pop back to it later since it's taking a little bit of time here to load. It's probably because I have so many things open for today here. But it's really great. Oh, never mind. My babbling on allowed it to do so. So this is what CNN looked like back in 2000. Look at how cluttered this is. It's the first thing that jumps out to me. And I love that the T in entertainment doesn't even fall in this sidebar. But it would be really interesting to compare, you know, what is CNN like today? What does it feature as its breaking news? What are the different things like that versus now? So it's just a great compare and contrast tool for students to look at what's online today versus what websites were like early on. I would love to see if there's, I haven't explored if Facebook is one of them, but it would be a great thing since so many of them are getting news via Facebook to see what that was kind of look back and forth. So it really can show you how significant events in late 20th, early 21st century kind of look then and now sort of thing. And I really love that it shows you images from those time frames that since might have been reviewed as well. So in that chat window, I think Annabelle or maybe Aaron had popped in question in there. What are your favorite online news sites? And I'm going to take this as a scope for students. So I know some folks already brought up ELA. If there's a couple other resources that you might be using there for that. And I'm going to give you about a minute to populate some answers, jump in there, and then we will come back to look at some final lesson plans. All right. So I hope you threw some things in that chat window. You can continue to do so as we're having some starting discussions here. But I'm going to throw it out there to Aaron. Aaron, do you have any favorite in there or any you want to mention too from that chat window?
Yeah, you know, I grew up. I always loved the Newsweek magazines that my teachers used to subscribe to. So that was, I know when I was in school, that was something I really loved. And you know, we'd always like flip through and find an article and discuss it. And so certainly now they've of course moved into the digital realm. But that was one I always felt that they were really accessible. And you know, the one that I love now, especially if you were at the last webinar, I have a small infatuation with music. Vocabularies this week in rap. I loved it. It was just such a really great way for my students to really, in a matter of they're usually almost like 2 to 3 minutes long, so it's really quick. It didn't take a lot of class time, but they pack a lot of news into that 2 or 3 minute time frame. And I used it a lot of times as kind of a springboard to whether it was a class discussion or whether it was like, okay, pick one thing that you learned about and then go and find an article or maybe, you know, that was a homework assignment where, okay, now I want you to go and do a deep dive into one of those topics. Looking at our today's Meet back channel, I see that Patricia really, she mentioned the Catholic News Agency has some really great articles. And Kay seconded that with the New York Times site, Philadelphia Catholic, and FEMA for Kids, FEMA. So I think it's a really great idea to provide a variety of resources for your students, and also to provide them some starter ones to show them, like, hey, check out these sites, because these are some really good sites that can put you down that path to avoid some of that fake news media, or some of the super biased media that you were talking about.
Aaron, that's awesome. Thank you for that report. I will also echo vocabulary's just general awesomeness, and it's a great
They
way to appeal high interest, but with all the objectives you want. Vocabulary has a great version. I think it's of the Telltale Heart. I used it for my Edgar Allan Poe unit all the time, and it was really, really well done. I think that's what it was. I'm not sure if it's that or the Raven. I don't know. I did a whole unit, but there was a vocabulary piece in there. Of course, it's escaping me right in this moment which one it was. But vocabulary is really great. And I think, Aaron, something you said that really sparked a thought in my head is really giving them an opportunity to learn what they like and take a deeper dive on their own, and then they'll know better resources to go to. So thank you for bringing that up, and thanks to the folks who popped some resources into that today's meet. I love that, and I can't wait to dive into some of those that I haven't necessarily dived into before myself. So I'm getting lots of ideas to take back. So there also are on the online some really great news literacy lesson plans. So as this becomes a more prevalent issue for teachers today, especially I think because sometimes it's very supported at home where students are really having a conversation or access to things at home with parents, and sometimes they're really only exploring or hearing or reading or seeing news on their own, and they don't really have anybody to break that down with. I think we definitely could identify both ends of that happening with our students. There's some really great lesson plans that have come up as resources for dealing with this. So I'm going to share some of those with you. Again, when you get the archive of this, it's all going to be in there for you to take a deeper dive into. And while we're taking a deeper dive on those in there, feel free to pop into the discussion in today's meet any other resources that you're thinking of that you use to address news media in your classroom. So first, teach fake news directly. KQED Learning has a lesson plan out there that really deals with the objectives of analyzing problems and potential consequences associated with the spread of fake news. Not something we really dived into talking about today, the consequences, the ripple effects of inaccuracy being spread, but that's a great road to take, because I'm sure that would be a high interest road with students too. What's the bigger picture that happens with this? And then students identify and evaluate ways to avoid fake news in social and academic settings. Nothing would be worse to me than bringing up an article and talking with somebody and then later learning that was a fake news article. So I'm just going to pop to that here. So I want you to see that these lesson plans are really parsed out for you. And they have great resources. So this is from KQED Learning, Lesson Plan Fighting Fake News. There's an opening writing prompt. They list the objective, essential questions, key vocabulary that you need students to understand or maybe to review prior to the start of this. This activity in here also includes evaluating an online image, which is such a useful skill as well. And the one it actually has to do with was that there were, and this was a huge issue in the election cycle, and I hope I'm not bringing up something, again, this really isn't necessarily a political discussion, but this had to do with the Pope. And there was it was the most circulated fake news story of the election cycle last year, of the presidential election cycle last year, was that the Pope was endorsing then candidate Trump, and it was this big thing that was shared, and it turned out it was a totally fake, out of context story there, but it was an infographic that was shared more than any other on Facebook specifically, and so it's about evaluating that online image. So a great way to tie in, and maybe you can go back and do some reading with your students about the Pope and his stance on politics and his stance on different topics, and that might be a great way to pull in that I think it was Patty who mentioned Catholic News Agency might have some resources in there for that, and it includes different things on Snopes, and it gives you some guided discussion questions, and really too even some extension activities that I think are really great for helping students. If you find that your students are getting really good at this, roll with it. It's a great way. So it has a really great tools in there. It's all laid out for you. You can even pick and choose in there and mention some circle chats or think, pair, shares that you're able to utilize, and it does align those standards there for you. So that's one that really deals specifically with fake news. Next one, a PBS has one that's a great essential question is, how do you know if a news source is reliable? And maybe this is step one for you and your students. So I'm going to pop into that one there. This is a lesson plan that is about a 50-minute class, so a great way to kind of adapt it into your time frames here for grades 7 to 12. And again, I really love that the whole activity is really laid out. It actually has to do with a very similar kind of piece when it came to the election, and I think that's a lot of resources out there do reference the 2016 presidential election. So if that's really a buzz topic or a trigger topic in your school community, you might want to think critically about whether that's the right lesson plan or resource or not, just because that's really where we saw that catchphrase take off. So this really speaks to that and has to do all questions about that, and it even has extension activities as well. A lot of these lesson plans will also reference the News Literacy Project and Project Look Smart as great resources as well that you can really dive into as an educator. Last that I'd like to feature for you in terms of direct lesson planning here is teaching news literacy via the Common Sense Media put together a news and media toolkit, and this is relatively new for Common Sense Media. We really are big supporters in our office of Common Sense Media and what they put out there. It's a great resource for educators. It's a great resource for parents. I know that we are really utilizing as part of our tech plan goal this year that digital literacy, digital citizenship curriculum that Common Sense Media has so wonderfully put together for all of us as educators to utilize. They also have a news and media toolkit, and there's different grade levels in there, and there is a 9 to 12 band with scripted lessons addressing a lot of our topics from tonight. They pop up real quick here, and you can search versus topic. So that fact versus opinion in there. Teaching fake news, how do you evaluate reliability? Is something newsworthy? Know your zone. What are the main reason people create and share information? And you can see some of these are full lesson, or most of these, if not all, are full lesson plans that you can utilize. Some of them do relate to some of the topics and tie in very nicely with the topics in your digital citizenship curriculum. Some of them hop over. So copyrights and wrongs is actually one that is shared between both of those toolkits, and these 4 new ones are specifically for this news kit or a toolkit itself. So a lot of great resources that they come with. Videos, you can see that this includes educator videos, student videos, full lesson plans, the activity sheet to download. So really, if you're feeling a little bit uneasy about you know, breaking into some of these topics in your classroom, these lesson plans that are pre-made for you are such a good place to start, because a lot of times, and I know specifically with the Common Sense Media, some of them list like anticipated responses from students too, or they're really giving you some great resources to dive in so that you feel more confident. As an educator, we can really speak to that. Pulling from Aaron's digital literacies, confidence is in there too. So feeling more confident presenting these types of lessons, these skills to students. So with that, I'm going to ask that if you have any final questions tonight, that you pop them into our chat window now, and I'm actually going to throw it over to Annabelle. Annabelle, would you share about what's coming up in January and February? We've completed, or we're just about to complete our first pairing of AOP Tech webinars for the year. I cannot believe we are already in November. How did that happen? And we are all set for January and February, so I'd love for you to share with everyone what's on the agenda for then.
Absolutely. We have a great lineup coming up in January and February. Our winter series webinars will be a Google Jumpstart to the new year. In January, I will be taking you through Google Drive and Docs, and I'll go through the basic features that will help you organize your workflow, and also to maximize productivity in and out of the classroom, and also recent updates to those two apps. In February, we are truly fortunate and really excited to be joined by none other than Mr. Gene Carboni. Gene will be sharing and guiding us through Google Classroom and sharing his wealth of knowledge with this G Suite app. So if you're new to Google, or you're just looking kind of for a Google refresher, we hope you join us for our next series, which the first one will be January 3rd, and then on February 7th. So I hope you join us.
Awesome. I am so looking forward to those. And just so you know, too, folks, that those are back to our 1 hour format.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yep.
Yeah. I mentioned that because really these are the essential, what I would probably think of as essential Google skills to really jumpstart your use of Google or refresh you. So I am looking forward to attending them. Google is always making changes and improving, and that's something I really love about the G Suite platform personally myself. And so I always love getting a good refresher in there. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot from Annabelle and Jean, and I hope that you are too, and I hope that you join us for that. So any final comments, any final questions? I took a quick peek at that question or today's meet, but I didn't see any questions pop in there. Any last opportunity for questions or comments or anything from Aaron and Annabelle that you'd like to share to wrap us up here today? I'll take that silence.
Nothing.
Awesome.
Go ahead,
I'll take that happy silence in there.
No, I think we had a great discussion. There's a lot of great resources that everybody shared. So I think looking back, some great sites to take back to the classroom and share with our students.
Awesome. So those attending today's meet, know that today's meet is going to be open for, I think I said it for maybe 2 weeks or so. So you're able to use that link and go back and scan through if somebody mentioned something, and then 2 days from now you're like, oh, what was that? Know that you're able to go back to that. So with that, then we'll wrap up. I'll toss it back over to Aaron, but thank you everyone for joining us tonight on this. I loved getting to talk about this with you today. A little different from the tech, some of the tech things I normally get to talk about, and it's always fun to talk about a personal passion in there as well. So Aaron, I am going to kick it back to you from hopefully, or if you're able to grab that, because we're all in under Bill today, so it's only giving me the option of passing it back.
Oh. thought it was. Can you see my screen now?
Here we go.
There we go. Show my screen. Well, thank you, Alissa, and thank you for just incredible resources and great ideas. That was really incredible. I will be totally transparent. I messed up a little bit in my introduction in two areas. I first misidentified Alissa's districts. She is the Philadelphia North and Bucks County Tech Integration Coach. And I also failed to introduce our newest member of the AOP Tech Coaching Team, Miss Annabelle Dotsman, who will be covering Montgomery and Chester counties. And so please forgive me both for those errors. We are very pleased to have Annabelle from St. Ephraim's with us join our team. And certainly as you are looking at the resources that Alissa has provided in the handouts, if you have questions, please feel free to send them to us. All of our email addresses are listed. And certainly as you're in the classroom, if you'd like to roll out some of those resources in your classroom, you have us at your disposal. Please feel free to reach out and connect with us. We are happy to help out in any way we can, whether that's answering your questions via phone or email, or coming out and sitting side by side and working through problems or difficulties together. That is really our role as a tech coaching staff. Before we end in our closing prayer, I also certainly want to take an opportunity to highlight all the social media outlets that we are on. One of our goals as a department is to really grow together and to take the distances that separate us physically and nullify those distances and connect digitally. And so if you're on Twitter or Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, please feel free to look for @AOP Tech and find us, like us, and tell us what you are doing in your classroom. We love hearing all the exciting things that are going on around the diocese. So please feel free to share out with us. And I certainly want to echo what Annabelle said in the January webinars. I think they're going to be a tremendous opportunity to refresh on those skills, maybe something that you may have missed when you learned it the first time, but also to really know about those newest upgrades and features. And certainly we encourage you to sign up. Visit aoptech.org. And you will see the registration link just a few scrolls down on the main page. And we certainly would look forward to having you join us in January and February for two really exciting webinars. And with our final prayer, I recognize that we are entering the cough and cold season. In fact, I was visiting with a school today, and their teacher was just starting to come down with something. So I thought it would be appropriate to close by keeping those who are affected in our thoughts and prayers. And so in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, think, O God, of our friends who are ill, whom we now commend to your compassionate regard. Comfort them upon their sick bed and ease their suffering. We beg for deliverance and submit that no healing is too hard for the Lord, and if it be His will, we therefore pray that you bless our friends with your loving care, renew their strength, and heal what ails them in your loving name. Thank you, Lord. St. Jude, pray for us. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So on behalf of Alissa, Annabelle, Bill Brannick, the entire AOP Tech team, I just wanted to thank you for what you do on a daily basis and for giving up part of your evening to join with us tonight. And I certainly want to thank Alissa for a tremendous presentation with great resources. So thank you very much. We look forward to you joining us in January. Have a great night, everybody.